Hello everyone and welcome to The Vortex, where lies and falsehoods are trapped and exposed. I'm Michael Vorse. Quite often we get knocked here at The Vortex for being insensitive to other religions. Our official response to that, is whatever. Sensitivity is, we suppose, in the mind of the offended, which makes the charge nebulous at best. One man's offense is another man's truth and validation. But that said, we must point out that there is a virulent current of Protestantism that is rabidly anti-Catholic. Now, liberals and milquetoast Catholics don't like to either admit this very often, or when they do, they minimize that hatred that folks have towards the faith. Many times, the motivation for dismissing or ignoring the hate is so that they don't have to confront it. It's much easier for some personalities to move through life always wanting everything to be pretty and sunshiny and fuzzy and balloons. They aren't equipped to deal with the ugliness of life. But that doesn't make the ugliness of life go away. In fact, it gives the ugliness of life the upper hand because it can proceed unchecked then in many places. We reference the heresy of Protestantism, and that is what it is, a heresy, because it is a distortion of Christianity, actually of Christ himself. And let's make a point here very clear. We are not saying that modern-day 21st century individual Protestants are heretics. We're talking about the system of Protestantism, and it is a heresy. Within Protestantism, there are over 40,000 different competing versions of Christianity. 40,000. Some are crazy liberal like most of the mainliners, such as Episcopalians or Presbyterians, who have essentially given up any pretense to being rooted in their own tradition or their own version of scriptures. Then there are, among many others still, a much more rabid fundamentalist band. These groups form a hard center nucleus of what the majority of Protestantism is today. The old guard Protestant faiths are fading away. But these pulpit-pounding, frothing, and spitting ones are growing in numbers, and it is from these buildings that the current Protestant group mindthink is really emerging these days. They have the spotlight, they have the megaphones, they have the high-profile personalities that command center stage. And all of that is used to rain down lies and hate on the Catholic Church. We've attached a link to one such sermon, if it can even be classified as a sermon, by the Baptist preacher Robert Jeffress, the same fellow who drew attention a week or so ago when he made comments about Mormonism and Mitt Romney. In his screed, he says that Satan is behind the Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church is the whore of Babylon talked about in the book of Revelation. Now again, the more milquetoast Catholic crowd will just sort of nervously laugh this off. Don't be so quick. Jeffress drew attention because he was the preacher man who introduced Republican GOP hopeful Texas Governor Rick Perry at the Values Voters Summit. For the moment, the influence men like him may have in the world of politics, or may not have, how much or little it may actually be, is not the topic of this vortex. What is that he and people like him, like preacher John Hagee, who is another untheological loudmouth who commands loud audiences and weak-minded or ill-informed people, who sit by absorbed by the personalities of these stump preachers and believe what they say. That's the focus. They build huge buildings and assemble together huge numbers of people who they train, and they write books and launch TV shows and own and operate a sizable communications apparatus that spreads their lies and garbage far and wide. They school so-called missionaries and send them to third world countries in Africa and Latin America, where they eat away at already converted Catholic populations and convince them of their stupidity and animus against the church founded by Christ. And again, the softies in the church and those unprepared or afraid to pick up the sword against this mindless nonsense sit back and make up excuses and prefer to talk about what we have in common with them on the moral front. Granted, we do have much in common with them on the moral front. They are almost always pro-life, pro-family, and all the rest. But what good does all that do if a person, in the end, if a person, he or she, walks away from the fullness of the truth that exists only in the Catholic Church? Many Catholic pastors at many Catholic parishes are happy to cooperate and share and dialogue with and have bake sales and little warm and fuzzy prayer services and community outreach exchanges with these groups. if they aren't working to A, convert them, and B, protect their flocks against the falsehoods, all the little tea socials and quilt sewing parties they invite them to won't accomplish a thing. Too many Catholics are coming under the sway of this tidal wave from the Protestant world, which manifests itself as little else than a subtle undercurrent in thousands of Catholic parishes and disguises itself as ecumenism. The Church has to fight on many fronts. Some are obvious, like the culture wars where we battle agnostics and atheists and secular humanists. But other battles may not seem so urgent, like with the Protestant heresy, which in the end may prove to be even more destructive because while the enemy in the culture wars undermines moral truth, Protestantism undermines doctrinal truth. God love you. I'm Michael Voris.
Please help us keep delivering these kinds of messages that so desperately need to be heard and acted on. Join RealCatholicTV.com today as a premium subscriber. Become immersed in the faith established by Jesus Christ. The Catholic Church is the only hope against evil because that is its God-given mission. As our Lord said, apart from me, you can do nothing. Join RealCatholicTV.com today as a premium subscriber and come to learn and love Christ more deeply.